Howdy, howdy, folks. Welcome to the 13th module of the CompTIA A course. Now, as you can probably see on the screen, this module is called Installing and Troubleshooting Operating Systems. So it's fair to assume there's going to be a whole lot of talk about, well, operating systems. Now, before you ask, let me cover it for you. There is three main sections in this specific module. The first one already has operating system in the name, so that should come as no surprise either. It is called Operating System Installations and Upgrades. Then we're going to be moving on to install and configure applications. The third and last section will be troubleshoot Windows operating system problems. Alright, like usual, before we jump into that first section, this is the point where I beg you for a like. No, I'm kidding, I'm not going to beg. But I would appreciate it if you guys give the video a like. I mean, I am doing this stuff for free, after all. And if you give it a like, you are going to be helping other people out there, because then, well, YouTube pushes this out to more people out there that actually needs it. And of course, if you'd like to know when the next module comes out, then maybe consider subscribing. I don't know. And just as an added extra, which has got nothing to do about the channel, if you guys are interested, I do have a Discord channel, or let me say a Discord server, I think that's what they call it. You can find that in the video description down below. I think it's like way down in the description. You're going to have to scroll down all the way to the bottom of the video description. There you will find my Discord server. The idea behind that is to start an IT community. It's actually kind of already started, where I can have a bit of a discussion of you guys can have a discussion amongst one another, and it's all about studying. It's all about free IT training. The whole idea is to share free knowledge amongst one another, not just me, other people that also has knowledge. So if you are studying, you can go and join there. If you are someone that's got a lot of knowledge, you can go and join there. Maybe you can help some other people, because I alone cannot answer everybody's questions. I am just one man, and obviously I don't know everything. Man, IT is very wide. So whether you are studying, whether you know something, either way, feel free to join the server. Maybe you can help someone. Maybe you can learn something. Wow, I'm talking a lot of nonsense today. Alright, let's jump into that first main section. That would be operating system installations and upgrades. Now, in this section, the first thing I'm going to take you guys through is installation and upgrade considerations. Things you should keep in the back of your mind when you do these things. First thing up, attended installations. What the heck is that? Now, folks, that is something we've actually been doing all along. It's something you actually do know. You just don't know that you know it. I know, it sounds weird, doesn't it? Attended installation is when you do everything manually yourself. You go and start that computer or that server. You go and insert the DVD or the flash drive or network cable. You go and click on install Windows or whatever operating system you're installing. You click next, next, next. You do absolutely everything yourself as a human, manually. That is considered an attended installation because you are attending to it. It's manual, in other words. Then you get what we call unattended installations. Now, this one gets very tricky very quickly, and it gets very deep very quickly. A lot of medium to large size organizations like making use of this. I use this all the time with my clients. That is when there is some level of automation involved. It's either partially automated or 100% completely automated. Now, how the cheese do we do that? Guys, there is many softwares and applications you can go and make use of to go and do that. Some of them are Microsoft, some of them are non-Microsoft. At the end of the day, it's going to probably come down to your unique needs and preferences. Every company is unique at the end of the day, I suppose. So when it comes to unattended installations, you get what we call low touch. Some people call it light touch. Same thing, potato, potato. That means it's somewhat automated. Now, this could be a matter of maybe you're going to go to the people's machines. You're just going to make sure they're turned on. Make sure that they're connected to some sort of Wi-Fi or a network cable. You're going to click on deploy or whatever it is you're going to go click on. And that's it. You're going to go for lunch. You're going to call it a day. You're going to come back after half an hour or so. And it is going to be done. Windows will be installed, or whatever image you're deploying will be installed. So that is an example of a low touch slash light touch scenario. It still requires some level of interaction from the user, being you in most cases, but for the most part, it is automatic. Then, also in the category of unattended installations, you get something called zero touch. Now, you can probably guess what that is because the name kind of tells you it. It means it is 100% automatic. This could be something you scheduled or one of your colleagues scheduled like a whole month ago, for all we know. This is to go and upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11, or to go and install something. And now today you get to the office and suddenly you've got Windows 11 installed. Now you're very confused, scratching your head, squinting at your screen, wondering what the cheese is going on. And then you remember, oh, yeah, that's right. I scheduled this a month ago. Upsie daisy. I forgot about it. So, yes, that could be an example of an unattended installation. So, it could either be low touch slash light touch. It can be zero touch. Now, as for the previous topic we just mentioned, which was attended, that is called high touch installations because it requires a high level of interaction from the user, being you in most cases. Now, moving on to the third point here, clean installations versus an in-place upgrade. What are these two? What is the difference between these two? And I can guarantee you this will be a question in the exams. You need to make sure you understand the difference between these two. And you also just understand them in general, quite frankly, folks. So a clean installation is when the machine is blank. There's nothing on the hard drive. It's a brand new hard drive, or you just went and wiped the hard drive. You or the user is about to go and install Windows or whatever. Let's just assume it's Windows. You're about to go and install this from scratch for the very first time on that hard drive. Well, maybe not the first time, but it's a blank hard drive. You're about to go and install it, and you're about to go and do everything from scratch. That is a clean installation. There's some benefits to that. There's some drawbacks to that. We'll get to that in a moment. Then we have what we call an in-place upgrade. Now, the name upgrade should tell you what you need to know. That means there is some sort of operating system on that hard drive already, and you are going to be upgrading that operating system. So maybe you or this user has Windows 10 on this machine, and you or this user is about to go and upgrade to Windows 11 on this machine. So the most important thing you need to remember here with regards to an in-place upgrade is it means you or this user already has an operating system, and you're simply going to be upgrading that operating system. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have watched module 12, the previous module of this course, but if you have not, I would advise you to go and watch that one first, because this module follows directly on that module. In module 12, for those of you that has watched it and that do remember, you would remember if you're going to go and do an upgrade, you need to stay in your lane. This applies to architectures. It applies to additions. So if your user is running 32-bit version of Windows, you can only upgrade to another 32-bit version of Windows. If you're running 64-bit, you can only upgrade to another version of Windows that's 64-bit. And if you have a certain edition of Windows, if you're having Windows 10 Home, you can only upgrade to Windows 11 Home. If you're running Windows 10 Professional, you can generally only upgrade to Windows 11 Professional. So you want to stay in your lane as much as possible. Now, when you do a clean installation, those rules go out the window. You don't have to stay in your lane. You can go ziggity-zag as much as you want to. Pretty nifty, right? All right, a couple of upgrade considerations, folks. The first is hardware compatibility. So if I'm about to go and upgrade my machine, let's say I'm currently running Windows 10, and I plan on getting myself that new Windows 11 operating system because all my friends have been bragging about it and I feel kind of left out. Maybe I'm just the kind of guy that would like to keep up to date. So it might be a matter of, hey, let me try and install it and see if I can install it. Maybe it'll give me an error. Maybe it will not. But generally, you want to go and check hardware compatibility first before you go and do some shenanigans like that. Check if you've got enough RAM. Is your CPU fast enough? Do you have enough storage space in your hard drive? And then you also want to go and check if there's anything new you should be aware of. And when it comes to Windows 11, that actually is the case, folks. Windows 11 has got a couple of weird hardware requirements that's now new. So back in the day, if you could run Windows Vista, you could run Windows 7. You could run Windows 8, 8.1, and 10 because the hardware requirements is pretty much identical between all of those. But if you go look at Windows 11, that is not quite the case. The original hard requirements, yes, that's pretty much still the same. But Windows 11 unfortunately has a couple of weird extra requirements, one of which is a TPM chip. So if you don't know what TPM stands for, it is a short abbreviation for Trusted Platform Module. It's an actual chip on the motherboard that does the encryption for things like BitLocker. And now Microsoft decided it'll be funny to go and make that a requirement for Windows 11. So you need that to be able to run Windows 11. Has to be a TPM chip on the motherboard. Has to be version 2.0 or higher. Otherwise, it's a no-go. Then you should also go and look at things like application and driver support. Are the current applications you or the user are running, will they be supported on this new version of Windows? They might not. The current drivers you've got, do they work on the newer version of Windows? They might not. You might want to go and test that out first or confirm that first before you go and do these shenanigans. If it's your own machine, that's one thing. But if you go and do this on a customer or a user's machine, that can be very embarrassing. It's very unprofessional. It's just going to downright make you look stupid. You don't want to do that. Then you also need to consider things like backup files and user preferences. So if you're about to go and upgrade a person's machine, let's assume this is not your machine, you should probably consider backing up their files first, because once you go and upgrade, there's always this slim chance that something might go sideways and then the person could end up losing all their documents or files. And yeah, guys, that is not going to end well. The customer could very well end up suing you. They're going to moan, they're going to groan, and they're going to complain. It's not something you want to deal with. Now, Microsoft specifically says you will not need to go and back up. And I've never had a situation where I've seen it failed on me where it didn't go and upgrade and then the files were lost. I've never had that, and I've been in IT a very long time. But even though I've never had it, and even though I've done this countless times, that does not mean you should not back up. You always back up. And then heck, you do another backup just because. You can never have too many backups, because one day is one day and stuff will go sideways and you're going to regret not doing a backup. Anyway, I'm talking a lot of nonsense. Let's move on. Boot methods. So what the heck do I mean by this? Boot methods, well, I should rather say, what does CompTIA mean by this? Is how can you start a server or a computer? Now, unlike the normal hard drive. So normally when you go and press the power button on a laptop, desktop, or server, it boots from the hard drive. Why? Because that is where the operating system is installed, which is in most cases going to be Windows. Now, what if I'm starting this machine for the very, very first time before Windows is even installed on a hard drive? Or what if I would like to go and wipe the hard drive and install a new version of Windows or whatever? How can I boot other than from the hard drive? So that's basically what boot methods is all about. So, but before we get to that, let's first talk about boot device priority. What is that? That is, what device do you want to boot from first? Now, up until about 5 years ago, maybe up until 10 years, between 5 and 10 years ago, we had only what we would call the BIOS. You can enter the BIOS on any computer by pressing the delete key repeatedly or the F2 key repeatedly on most computers. For some computers it's F2, for some it's delete, for some computers it's both of these keys, and the other day I actually had a computer where it's neither of these two keys. Yep. So for the most part, it'll normally tell you. So as soon as you press the power button, within the first few seconds, it's going to tell you, press F2, press delete to enter setup, blah, blah, blah. And if you keep pressing that 2 or 3 times, it's going to take you into that machine's BIOS. You can only navigate and control the BIOS by using the keyboard. And there's not a lot you can do there, but one of the main reasons why we do go in there is to go and choose the boot device priority. By default, your machine is going to try and look for something to boot from on the hard drive first. Now, if you're about to go and install a new operating system, or you want to go and wipe that hard drive, we do not want it to go and look on the hard drive first for something to boot from. We want it to boot from somewhere else, like a DVD or a flash drive, for example. So you're going to go and insert a DVD into your optical media, or you're going to go and insert a flash drive into the USB port, for example. Now you need to go and boot from that. How do we do that? You need to go and choose the boot device priority. The boot order is what some people call it. So you're going to go and configure that machine to boot first from USB or to boot first from DVD. So what that means is it's going to go and look for something to boot from first in those locations. And if it's unable to find something in those locations to boot from, it'll go to the next item on the list and the next item on the list, and eventually it's going to end up on a hard drive again, and it's going to boot successfully. So if you told your machine to boot first from optical media, it's going to go look in your DVD-ROM first if there's a bootable DVD. Should it not find one, it's going to go to the next one on the list, which is probably going to be your hard drive. It's probably going to find the old version of Windows and it's going to boot like normal. But if you do have a bootable DVD in that optical media, it is going to boot from that. That now allows you to go and format your old hard drive, because you cannot delete something while it's in use. So if you want to format your old hard drive, your old Windows, you need to boot from something else, from somewhere else, before you can delete the old hard drive. You can never delete something while it's in use. Something you guys might have noticed. I mean, if you go and open a file on your computer and you try and delete that file while it's still open on your screen, it's not going to work. It's going to tell you this file is in use or this document is in use. You cannot delete something while it is in use. You have to close it first. Then you can go and right click on it and say delete, or say just go and press the delete key, or hold shift down and press delete. That's how it works, guys. Anyway, so the next item here is optical media. We know what that is. That is when you're going to go and boot from something like a CD or a DVD. Nobody does that anymore. I mean, half the machines these days don't even come out of DVD-ROMs, you know. You probably would have seen that. Another popular method, which is what a lot of us go and use, is USB or external. Heck of a lot faster than using a good old conventional DVD. And this is very popular amongst, you know, people like myself. If you're going to go and format your own machine at home, USB is the way to go. If it's a small office of 5 to 20 people, USB is probably going to be the way to go as well. But as soon as you start looking at a medium to large size company, then it's probably not going to be USB. Then you're probably going to go and deploy it over the network via something like a server. That's basically what it comes down to. Now, speaking of network, that's the next one here. You can also go and boot or deploy something via a network. And that includes operating systems, guys. You can go and install an operating system on your user's devices via the network. And this is normally an image of sorts. All right, let's move on. Repair installation. So this is if you or the user have an installation that has already been done. And when, not if, but when it starts giving you issues, because we know it's going to happen at some point in time, these things I'm about to list for you are some of the things you can go and do to try and resolve it. It's not the only things, obviously not, but these are some of the main things. The first is something called recovery partition. This is something that actually happens automatically in most cases on machines. It's a small little hidden secret partition, if you want to call it something. And if used correctly, you can go and use this to go and reset your machine or to use this machine back to, well, shipping position or shipping state. I think some folks call this OEM factory reset in some cases. So it's kind of like putting it back to factory spec. You're putting it back the way it was when you got the machine, you know, assuming you bought it. But most of the time, it's going to be us that's going to be installing this. Then you can also go and do something called reset Windows. Now, at the moment, that's the only thing you can go and do. It's just called reset Windows. But in the beginning, when Windows 10 was released, this was many moons ago. I think this was like 5, 6 years ago. There was something called refresh, and there was something called reset. They did not do the same thing. They were similar, but it was not exactly the same. So before we explain these two, let me give you guys a bit of a scenario. About 5 years ago or more, if you had a computer, or you had a client or a user that had a computer, and you've done everything there is to go and resolve an issue in this computer, this could be a virus attack or whatever, the last thing we normally do, this is your last resort, is to format that person's machine. So if all else fails, then and only then do we format the person's machine. So you're basically going to go and reinstall Windows from scratch. You're going to go make a backup of the person's machine, assuming you're lucky enough to be able to do a backup. And once you've installed Windows from scratch again, then you'll go and restore the backup, and then hopefully the problem would have gone away. Now, this sounds easy when I explain it like that, but guys, it wasn't that simple. Doing a backup was a nightmare. And when you go and install Windows from scratch again, now you need a bootable disk. So now you're going to go and ask the user, the client, the customer, ma'am, sir, where is your bootable disk? Half the time, they're not going to know where it is, let alone what it is. Not the biggest issue, because as long as you use their legal license, you can use any disk or flash drive. You can even go and download this from Microsoft's website. You download the same edition or version of Windows they've got. You make it a bootable disk. You boot from that. You install that. And then when you get to the window where it asks you for the key, you insert their legal key. So now you get stuck at another problem. Step 2. You ask the user, the client, or the customer, ma'am, sir, where is your product key? They don't know what that is. They don't know where that is. You see, now that everything comes to a grinding halt now. Now you can't help the customer or the client because you don't have a license. Now, granted, yes, most of us can probably go and crack the freaking thing, but if you're doing this for a customer, a client, or a company, you don't want to go and crack it because that puts you in the spotlight, and quite frankly, it obviously is illegal. You don't want to do that. So now what? Everything comes to a grinding halt because the customer doesn't have a license. The only thing you can do at this point in time is offer to help them buy a legal license. Heck, maybe you are a company that can sell them a legal license. But if they don't have money, then what? What are you going to do in those situations? That was a real thorn in my side back in the day. Now, refresh and reset, which is a function or a benefit that came out on Windows 10, this really made things easier. Unfortunately, I could never really benefit out of these benefits because that's the time when I left the field and I went into training again, or I should say back to training. So what does these two functions do? If you were to go and use refresh, that is like formatting the machine, but you don't necessarily need a DVD or a disk. You don't necessarily need the license. It puts the machine back the way it was, basically factory spec if you want to call it that, but it keeps the person's data. Wow, huh? Doesn't that sound amazing? So you're basically doing a format, you're telling me, and I get to keep my data? What? Yes, it is true. I'm not talking nonsense. It keeps your data. Unfortunately, any settings you had on that machine, any programs that were installed in that machine afterwards, that would be gone. So it's as if you just installed Windows. All settings and programs and games and stuff will be missing, with the exception of the data, of course. That is going to be kept. So everything in your documents, your videos, your pictures, your music, all of that would obviously be kept. Lekker. Now, what the heck is reset? Reset is a little bit more extreme than the refresh one. That kind of was like a factory reset. Everything on that machine will be wiped, including the data this time round. And well, you didn't need a DVD or a license. So that was the benefit. Because let's face it, users never know what that is. If you go check on the more recent editions of Windows, which is what all of us are running now, refresh does not exist anymore. That does not mean that functions or features or benefits have gone missing. That still does exist. So every 6 months or so, Microsoft releases a huge fat update called a feature update. And whenever Microsoft decides to go and do this, they go and add stuff, remove stuff, change stuff, delete stuff. That's typical Microsoft for you. And on one of those big fat updates, they went and removed the refresh function, and they added the benefits that came with it into the reset function. So if you were to go into the reset button now, that would traditionally just go and reset the whole machine to factory spec. Now, no, not so much. It's actually going to ask you now, hey, listen, my bra, you've clicked on reset. Do you want to wipe everything like the old traditional reset? Or, yep, there's an or now. Or would you like to keep something? And if so, what would you like to keep? Would you like to keep your documents? Would you like to keep your programs or your settings? So basically what happened here is they went and incorporated the refresh benefits into the reset function. So now it's a 2-in-1 kind of special, if you want to call it something. I don't know why they decided to do that, but it is what Microsoft did. If you're wondering what it used to look like, that is what it used to look like. You can see there on the screen, it says refresh your PC. It says reset your PC. That's kind of more or less what it used to look like back in the day. That's a screen grab from the past, if you want to call it that. And here's another picture for you guys. You can see this one looks slightly different from the previous one. So yeah, a blast into the past, if you want to call it that. Now, getting to a more modern day screenshot, this is what it looks like now if you were to click on reset. Now, it asks you, do you want to wipe or do you want to keep something? You see, that's quite different than what it used to look like, isn't it? Anyway, folks, we've reached the end of the first section in this module. Moving on to the second section, which is install and configure applications. Now, guys, if you haven't done it already, please remember, give the video a like. And if you've got any questions, drop those down in the comment section down below. First thing we're going to be talking about in this section is system requirements for applications. So assuming you have already installed whatever it is you're going to go and install, let's assume it's Windows 10 or Windows 11, that does not necessarily mean you or the user can just go and willy-nilly install any application or any game now. Nope, doesn't work that way, guys. Sometimes there's certain requirements that need to be met. You can think of this as having a checklist in front of you. Maybe you've got a little clipboard, it's got a piece of paper on it, it's got a bunch of checkboxes, and all of these checkboxes have to be ticked first before you can actually go ahead and install a certain application or a certain game. Yes, that actually really is the case, guys. So the first one we're going to be diving into here is Central Processing Unit, in other words CPU, system memory, and storage requirements. And this is not something new, but some of you guys might not notice. It depends on how much experience you've got. So all programs and games have these requirements. You need to have a certain CPU with certain performance. You need to have an X amount of system memory, that is known as RAM. And you need to have an X amount of storage. In other words, hard drive space storage, because you need to install this nonsense somewhere, right? So those are the main things. Now, under this category, the first thing you need to be aware of is 32-bit versus 64-bit dependent applications. So up until about roughly 2009, 2013, applications was kind of like in a 50-50 scenario. Some of them ran only on 32-bit operating systems or architectures. Some of them only ran on 64-bit operating systems or architectures. Now, at this point in time, we're sitting in a situation where pretty much every freaking thing runs on a 64-bit operating system. Everyone runs a 64-bit operating system. So I wouldn't worry about it. We're only mentioning it. There's no questions about that specifically in the exam. And pretty much everybody and his uncle is running 64-bit at this point in time. So I wouldn't worry about it. Now, what you do need to worry about is speed and cores. Make sure the CPU is fast enough to run that application or that game. Applications wise, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Most CPUs can run most programs. Games wise, I don't know. You might want to go and check that. You also want to go and check features. Depending on what you or the customer or the client want to go and do on that machine, you might need additional features, which requires you to run additional hardwares on your machine. This is things like a TPM, which is an actual chip on the motherboard. So if you or the user would like to go and use BitLocker encryption, you need a TPM chip for that. And now, obviously, as I've said earlier in this module, if you would like to install Windows 11, you also need a TPM chip. That is something entirely new, isn't it? You also need to go and look at your system memory, in other words, RAM requirements. This is especially applicable to games these days. Applications also, but mostly games. Do you have enough RAM to run that game or run that program? Then you also need to go and look at where you're going to install this program or this game. In other words, your hard drive. Do you have enough free disk space to be able to install that game or that program, whatever it might be? Alright, let's talk about dedicated graphics card requirements. If you go and buy yourself a normal PC off the shelf or you go and build one, it's not going to come out with a normal graphics card. You normally have to go and buy that separately, guys. So if you go buy yourself a normal PC or a normal motherboard, most of them do come with a graphics card, but that is known as a built-in graphics card. Some folks call this an onboard graphics card. Does that mean you can't play games? No, not necessarily. If you go and play cheap games, low-level games, you can probably go and play them. You can do your normal day-to-day tasks. You can run most programs on those built-in graphics cards, and they're a heck of a lot cheaper if they come with the motherboard. Now, as soon as you want to start doing some very graphics-intensive stuff, resource-intensive stuff, like if you're a graphics and art designer, a website developer, a gamer, or a game developer, anything in those regard, then you're going to need yourself a graphics card. And these things, guys, is some of the most expensive hardware components. That probably easily is the most expensive component in your computer, is the graphics card. So you get integrated CPU or chipset adapters versus dedicated add-in cards. So when we say integrated CPU or chipset adapters, that's the graphics card that is built in on the motherboard. It's an onboard card or a built-in card. The dedicated add-in cards is the separate ones you go and buy, with the ones that's so freaking expensive. You're gonna have to go and sell a sibling on eBay to be able to afford those cards. That's how freaking expensive they get sometimes. Other things you need to be worried about here is video RAM requirements. Now, just because you went ahead and bought yourself a fancy or expensive card does not mean you can go and run any game or any program now. You've got a lot of a better chance, obviously, yes. But a lot of games these days are so freaking resource hungry, you need a very, very, very expensive card just to be able to play them, never mind playing them on good graphics. So yes, video RAM is a bit of an issue. So some of these have 2 gigs RAM, some have 4 gigs, some have 8 gigs, some of them has got even more than that. The more it has, the more you can expect to pay for it, obviously. Alright, and then a quick one. Operating system requirements for applications. So we just spoke about the hardware requirements. That's a pretty big deal. Some applications are very fussy about the actual operating system on which they run. Some applications or games only run on Windows, or they only run on Mac or Linux. And then you get cases where they only run on a certain version or edition of Windows. They only run on Windows 7. They only run on Windows 8 or Windows 10 or 11. They only run on Windows Home, or they only run on Windows Enterprise because they require BitLocker encryption. They require virtualization. These are some of the things you can go and look at. So with regards to application to operating system compatibility, we've got Windows or Mac operating system version. Like I said, you need to make sure you're running the right version. So if we're talking about Windows, which is the most common one, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows 11. Are you running the right version? And as an added extra, I'm going to throw it in here. And then once again, make sure you're running the right edition, because these editions do come with different benefits, guys. And there's like some extreme cases where you might even need to run the right build of Windows. Yep, I kid you not, the right build. Alright, moving on to other considerations. So like the name suggests, these are some extra on the side considerations, if you want to call it something, you need to keep in the back of your mind when it comes to running operating systems, games, and applications on your machine. It's not always as straightforward as one might think. So the first thing we're going to be talking about here is shadow IT and impact to business. So some of these games or these applications have licensing requirements, especially if you come at this from a company's perspective. So if it's a medium to large size company and your users, your customers have decided they want to go and use a certain software or a certain application, they love it, they like the functions or the features it comes with, now you find out that, oopsie daisy, this program has a licensing requirement. They need a license for the whole company. Some programs need a per user license. For each and every user, you need a license there. So yeah, go and look at the licensing requirements. Maybe the user does not have a license. Maybe the company does not have a license. And then also go look at compliance. Some programs or applications are not allowed in certain types of business or just in your respective company. Some companies might have another program that does the same thing, or maybe the program is just outright not allowed. It's in some sort of violation of some sort of rule or policy in that company. Some companies have got the weirdest rules and policies, I tell you. Other things to keep in mind is user training and education. So when you're about to go and deploy a software application in your company, do the users know what it is? Do they know how to go and use it? So to give you an idea, a lot of companies are moving to the cloud. And if you and your company have just decided to go and deploy Microsoft Teams, a lot of us know what Microsoft Teams is. It's a voice conferencing platform. You can go and message on it. You can go and create teams on Microsoft Teams. Whole lot of things like that. It's a collaboration platform, effectively. I'm just using that as an example, guys. You don't need to know what Microsoft Teams is in this course. So if you decided to go and deploy an application like Microsoft Teams, do the users know what it is? Do they know how to go and use it to its full potential? You may or may not need to tell them what this program is, what it's used for. Heck, you might even need to go and show them. So maybe one day during lunchtime, you might need to invite some of these users into your boardroom, slap on a projector there, and just for half an hour show them what it is and how to go and use the most basic tasks. So that's something you need to keep in mind, guys. Increased support requirements. Depending on the application of software you're about to go and deploy or that you have deployed, some of these require a lot of support, especially in the beginning. The users are not going to know what the heck's going on. You're going to have to help them a lot in the beginning, and they're probably going to break a lot of stuff in the beginning. It is what it is, unfortunately. Other things, which is a main thing, is the impact to your operation, your client's operation, or to the business. So yeah, this would include things like deployment and support tools. If you're about to go and deploy something, do you know how to go and do it? What are you going to be doing? How are you going to be doing it? What tools are you going to be using? Some tools are going to influence the operation of the business. Some things are going to influence the network operation. There's a lot of factors you need to keep in mind here. Also, things like the impact to device and network. Some things you're about to go and do is going to make the person's device or basically render it useless. They won't be able to use it. And that is not something we want to go and do in the middle of business hours. We do not want to render someone or a group of someone's devices rendered useless. And we don't want to go and render the network useless. If we're going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting on the network might potentially become so slow to the point where nobody can do anything. So what do we have in this category? That's things like resource consumption or use of background services. So that's on the actual devices themselves. So on the actual device itself, maybe I'm using the person's CPU to its full extent. I'm using up all their RAM and now they can't do their work. The PC's become so freaking slow to the point where it feels like they've got a virus or where it's lagging. So you be careful for things like that. So ideally you want to do this kind of stuff after work when people are not actually using their machines. Other things to keep in mind here is the risks from faulty applications. Some applications are glitchy, faulty, or have a plain bug in them. And when you go and deploy that, especially if it's in the middle of working hours, it can have dire consequences. So you want to go and test these applications first. Go and deploy them onto some guinea pig PCs or guinea pig users. Test it first. Check if these applications behave the way you intend for them to go and behave. And if you like the results, then, well, you can go and deploy to the rest of the company because you know it's going to work. Lastly, guys, bandwidth usage. So this falls into the category of network. Bandwidth usage is the company's internet, for lack of a better description. So if you or your company or your client's company's got, let's say, a certain amount of megs on their line, maybe it's a 100 meg line, maybe it's a fiber line, you want to make sure you don't use too much of that, especially if you're going to be using something over the internet. So people need to send emails. Some of these folks need to be in voice conferences. Some of them need to go and download stuff. And if you're going to be using a lot of that bandwidth, it could potentially basically be as if the internet's off for some of these users. Not something we want in a company in the middle of working hours. Alright folks, that brings us to the end of the second section in this module. We've got one more section left in this module. The third one is called, and the last one is called, Troubleshoot Windows Operating System Problems. So this is now for people that already has Windows installed, yourself or your users or your customers. And these people have probably been running it for an X amount of time, but they are now potentially experiencing some sort of issues, some sort of problem, if you will. Alright folks, the first thing in the last section we're going to be talking about here is the boot process. And with this topic, the first thing I shall mention is power on self-test, better known as POST for short. We just call this the post process. If you don't know what the heck that is, if you've ever pressed the power button on a desktop computer, you might have noticed within the first couple of seconds, the first 2 or 3 seconds, when you press that power button, that machine makes a beep of sorts. There's a bit of a beep. That beep, believe it or not, is the power on self-test. One solid beep means everything is A-OK, it is working. So as soon as you press the power button on a laptop, desktop, or server, unfortunately it's just desktops that for the most part beeps with this, the computer checks itself within a matter of 1 second. 1 to 2 seconds, it checks everything. So you can kind of imagine the machine doing a bit of a roll call. It's going to say, hey, hard drive, are you there? Hard drive is going to say, yes, I'm here, I'm ready. It's going to say, hey, RAM, are you there? Are you ready to go? RAM's going to say, yes, I'm good and ready to go. And it's going to keep doing that of various hardware components. Now, the power on self-test does not work for everything, just a lot of things. For example, if there's some sort of issue with your computer's power supply, which is known as the PSU, the power supply provides power to your computer. So if there's something wrong with the power supply, it's not going to be able to provide power to your computer, and therefore the computer will not have power to make the beep in the first place. So if there's a power supply issue, you will not get a beep. Another thing you will not get a beep for is if it's a faulty motherboard. Well, it depends on what's wrong with the motherboard. But from my experience, I can tell you guys, usually if there's an issue with the motherboard, you will not get a beep. Why is that? Because the beep actually comes from the motherboard, guys. Yes, there's a small tiny little speaker on the motherboard, and if the motherboard has been blown or if it's faulty, it cannot make the beep because, well, the motherboard is the one that's the problem here. The motherboard is the one that actually does the post test to begin with. So if the motherboard is the faulty one, it's not going to do the post test. You see where I'm going with this? So something like the motherboard being faulty or the power supply being faulty, you're not going to get a beep or some sort of beeping code for. But if it's something to do with an expansion card, like a sound card, graphics card, modem, anything like that, you'll get a beep if there's something wrong with it. RAM chip being faulty or being loose, you'll get a beep. Hard drive issues, you'll get a beep. Anything like that. If it's overheating, you might get a beep. Um, so one solid beep, that means everything is working. Now, if something is wrong, what does that sound like? I can tell you it's not going to be one quick solid beep. Definitely not. You might get a lot of rapid beeps. You might get one long solid beep, or you might get a series of long and short beeps. Now, what does which one mean? I cannot tell you guys because for every manufacturer it's different. So you might have a gigabit board. For that one, rapid beeps might be there's a RAM issue. And if I've got an Intel board, rapid beeps might mean it's a CPU issue. It's not the same for all manufacturers and for all models. So depending on the manufacturer or the model you have, I would go and check that on the manufacturer's website. That's one place you can go and check it out. Most of the time, I don't even do that because normally it's quicker to figure out by just opening the box than to go to the website. I mean, if my PC starts beeping weird at me, I personally find it quicker and easier just to open the box and then I just check if I see something out of the ordinary. And visually, by doing a visual inspection, I might see, oh, you know what? I see the RAM looks like it's loose. Or, oh, you know what? I think the graphics card looks a bit loose to me. I just reseat it, restart the computer, boop, pop, there, problem solved. So generally, it's going to go a lot quicker just to go and try and open the box and just see if you can visually see anything wrong with it. But if you want, and you want to take the long way, or maybe you don't have a way of opening the box, then you can go to the website of the manufacturer. So if it's an Intel motherboard, you go to Intel's website and you go and check what that specific code means. These are called BIOS codes, by the way. Then we've got something called the boot device priority. We did briefly talk about this earlier in a previous section. The boot device priority is the order in which your computer is going to go and look for a boot device. So assuming everything is working hunky-dory, it's going to go and look on the hard drive first for something bootable, and usually we'll find an operating system there. It's going to start like normal, and you're going to go on with your day. But sometimes the boot order is incorrect. It might look for something bootable in the CD-ROM drive or the network drive. And maybe it is not configured to go and look for the hard drive after it does not find something in the previous bootable device locations. And that means the machine is not going to start. So something you want to go and check is just go and double check perhaps if the boot device priority is indeed correct. Because maybe someone fiddled with it and they didn't go and change it back the way it was supposed to be. It's not something I would worry about, but you never know these days. Alright, moving on to our next topic, boot recovery tools. And when we talk about this topic, the first thing that comes to mind is advanced boot options or advanced boot menu. Now, up until about Windows XP, no, I'm lying. I think up until Windows 7, yeah, more or less up until Windows 7, this used to be a black screen. So if your computer failed to start successfully in about 2-3 times in a row, you would be taken to a black screen, which is called the advanced boot menu or the advanced boot screen, which essentially would show the exact same options we see on this blue screen in front of us. There's a blue screen for you guys. And there you can go and choose a list of, or from a list of troubleshooting tools to go and resolve the issue. Now, just because you get taken to the advanced boot menu does not mean there's something wrong, folks. Sometimes the machine just thinks something is wrong. Meanwhile, there's nothing wrong. So the machine fails to start the first time, and this might just be a result of you yanking the power cable out. It's going to think, oh, okay, something is wrong. And if you yank out the power cable for a second time in a row for a valid reason, maybe you had a very valid reason for doing it, it's going to start thinking, okay, hang on a moment. I tripped twice now. Something must be wrong with my settings. Meanwhile, there's nothing wrong with this machine. It is you that is yanking the power out, quite literally from the machine, and now it thinks something is wrong. So just because you get taken to the boot menu, or the advanced boot menu, I should say, does not necessarily mean something is wrong. It could be, it could not be. Now, a way you can get to this menu manually, which is not something we do often, is while the computer is busy starting, you can keep pressing the F8 key. Now, this might change for some other computers. For some computers, it might be a different F key. But for most machines, it's the F8 key. So as soon as the computer starts, you just keep smashing that F8 key. press until you get to the advanced boot menu. Now, anything beyond Windows 7 is probably going to be a blue screen of sorts. It might not look exactly like the one you see on the screen right now, but it'll probably look very similar to that. On this advanced boot menu, you will have a list of tools to go and choose from to make your life a little bit easier. So these are covered at a later stage. The only one we're going to look at right now is the most widely used one, the most common one, which is safe mode. What is safe mode? If you or the user were to go and click on safe mode or choose safe mode, it's still going to start the computer, but it's going to look different because it starts the computer up without most of its drivers and without most of its services. Now, I'm going to say that again. I'm going to say it slowly. Without most. I'm not saying without any of its drivers. There is some drivers that still will start your machine. There are some services that will still start your machine, but it's minimal. It's hardly any. So sometimes we have a situation where the machine does not want to start because you or the user recently installed some sort of driver or you installed some sort of service, and this is the culprit causing the machine not to want to start. Now, how the freaking heck do you solve this issue if you cannot start the machine to begin with? That is where safe mode comes into play. It's going to start the machine up without most of its drivers and services and quite a few other things as well, which we're not going to worry about at this point in time. So when you go into safe mode, the first thing you might notice is there's going to be a whole bunch of code flashing on the screen. It's going to look like something from the Matrix movie. That is normal, guys. Don't get panicked. Don't freak out when you see that. It's going to take a bit longer to start than normal. Eventually, you will land on the normal login screen where you go and type in your password that you are familiar with. You might notice, though, it's going to look a bit different. It might be very large, very small, very skew, very distorted. And the reason behind that is because the graphics driver is not running. Remember, most drivers are not going to be running. One of which is, you've guessed it, the graphics driver. Anyway, so you're going to log in and you're going to go to whatever it is you'll need to go to, probably your device manager, and you're going to go remove the faulty driver, or you're going to go and stop that faulty service, and you're going to go and do whatever it is you need to go and do. Something else you guys might also see, depending on how deep you go, is this screen. I'm not going to say it's going to look exactly like this because something I've noticed is Microsoft likes to do updates, and every freaking time they do that, the menus look different. So today it might look like this. Next month it looks different. The month after that it looks different. They add options, remove options, change options, rename the options. Every freaking month they change this stuff. It's like they can't make up their mind, these guys. So take it with a spoon of salt, let me put it that way. That's more or less what you can expect to find there. Anyway, folks, another tool that you can go make use of, and this is one of my personal favorites, is something called System Restore. The very first thing I want to mention, there's a screenshot for you guys about this tool. It is exclusively only available on the client operating systems, not the server side. So if you want to go and restore a server, you're going to have to go and make use of something else, like a backup maybe perhaps. System Restore, that is something you can do on the client side. And this has been working since XP. Heck, for all I know, it might be even before XP. I've only started using this from Windows XP, so this has been a very long time. So from Windows XP all the way to Windows 11, it is there on the client side. It's effectively a time machine. It allows you to send your machine back in time to an earlier point in time when it was still working. So the System Restore creates what is known as checkpoints. It does this most of the time automatically, but you can go and make them manually from time to time. So generally when your machine is idling or when you're about to install something or uninstall something, basically when you're about to go make some sort of serious change to your machine, it will automatically make a system restore point. These are called automatic ones. And if you go and install something, uninstall something, and it turns out to mess up the machine in some sort of way to the point where it's not really usable anymore, you can go into this thing called System Restore, and you can go and choose one of your restore points. How many you've got depends on how much hard drive space you've allocated to this function. You can see there in the bottom right of the screenshot. You can go and choose how much of your hard drive space you want to allocate. The more space you allocate, the more System Restore points you will have. It's going to, at some point in time, going to go and override some of the older ones because it only has an X amount of restore points. Anyway, so you're going to go and choose one of your available restore points. Hopefully it can go back far enough in time, and it's at first going to look like nothing's happening. Then for about a minute or two, it's going to say it's busy doing System Restore on the screen, And after about another minute or two, you're going to see your machine is going to restart. So I would very much advise you guys to close all open documents and files and programs and games and stuff before you start this. Save everything before you start this. Then you go and run this. You should run this when there's nothing open on the machine, because you're probably going to lose your data and your files and your documents and stuff. So yes, run it. It's going to look like nothing's happening. After 2 to 4 minutes, it's going to restart the machine. It's actually going to look like an update is taking place on your computer. It's actually going to tell you, do not unplug the machine or turn off the machine, doing blah, blah, blah. You know, it's going to look like an update taking place. So if your machine normally takes 30 seconds to start, you're going to see it's going to take a heck of a lot longer to go and restart the machine. Now, how long does it actually take to do a system restore on the machine once you've started the process? For some machines, this is as quick as 5 minutes. For some machines, I've seen this take up to 2 hours. So it depends on how fast your machine is. In other words, how much RAM it's got, how much processing power it's got. It depends on how far back in time you're sending the machine. It depends on how much you've done in that period. You know, just because I'm sending my machine back 2 weeks in time does not mean it's going to take the same as your machine being sent back 2 weeks in time. Maybe I did a lot more on my machine. I installed a lot more, uninstalled a lot more, changed a lot more things on my machine. So what exactly does it do, though, when I say it sends your machine back in time? It's basically a backup of sorts. It backs up, for the most part, almost everything on a machine except your data. It does not, absolutely not, back up your data. Data is unaffected by this. So you're not going to lose data or gain data back by using this function. So if you recently installed something and you use this, it'll be uninstalled. If you recently uninstalled something and you use this, it's going to be installed again. If you change something, if you change the driver, updated the driver, install the driver, uninstall the driver, any sort of system change, we put back the way it was. This includes updates. So if you recently uninstalled an update or installed an update, whether you install or uninstall or change, it's going to put it back the way it was. Anything system-wise gets put back the way it was, but only system-wise, not your data. If you guys are curious what this looks like, I happen to have a virtual machine running in the background. It's got Windows 11 on it. Not that it matters, because you do this the exact same way in Windows 11. You do it the same way in Windows 10. So anyway, let me show you guys what this looks like on Windows, how you actually get to this freaking thing on Windows. So switching over to my virtual machine.
A few moments later.
Alright, so here is the virtual machine I was bragging about. Before we go and show you guys System Restore, if you are still watching this video at this point in time, which is basically almost an hour in, well done by the way. Here is the secret phrase you can go and type in the comment section down below, like usual, to confuse other people that don't actually watch this far. And that would be, I hear voices. So if you guys want to have some fun of it, you can go type in the comment section down below. I hear voices, or you can be creative about it. Say something along the lines of you can hear voices in your head. And I can only imagine that's going to confuse the heck out of people. Or you can just go and post your questions down below. Either or, it should still be fine. Now, as for System Restore, guys, I suppose there's many ways you can get to it. I'm just going to go run a search for it. So I'm going to go here to search at the bottom. This is for Windows 11. I'm going to go type in create. As soon as I start typing in create, you can see it already says create a restore point. We can just run a search for System Restore. So you can see it says create a restore point. I'm going to click on that. You can restore from here, or you can create from here. I'm going to drag this in the middle for you guys. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better. Now, if you want to go and create a restore point, this is going to only work on drive C. Now, normally on a normal computer, this will be turned on by default, and it'll always be turned on only for drive C, because it only affects system changes. Where is the system installed? Drive C and only drive C, guys. So if you're going to go turn this on for any secondary drives, it's pointless. You're just wasting space. It's going to serve no purpose. I would say don't bother. Only leave it on for drive C, and the more space you allocate, the better, of course. And the reason why mine is turned off is because I'm doing this on the virtual machine, and it's actually turned off on virtual machines by default. I'm going to go turn this on. That's normally what it would look like. Normally, I think the default space you allocate here is about 2%. The more space you allocate to this thing, the more restore points you will have, the further back you can go in time. Because there is sometimes cases where you might only realize there's a problem, or the user might only realize there's a problem after 2 weeks. And then, yeah, If you don't have restore points that goes back that far, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? So I'm going to say apply. Okay. And there we go. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any restore points at this point in time, so I'm going to make one manual one so you can see what it looks like. Create. You give it any name. You can give it any name. So if you're about to install a game or a program and you know it may or may not break your machine, you can just go and make a restore point call or whatever what you want. So I'm going to say installing Call of Duty, which is a pretty cool game. Yes, I do play Call of Duty, so if you guys want to play with me Call of Duty, you can let me know, and then maybe we can play together. Create. Give it a moment or so. It doesn't take very long to create this. It only takes between 30 seconds and 2 minutes in most cases. It's going to tell you this restore point has been created successfully. Now restoring it's a different story. So you can see there it says restore point was created successfully. Click on close. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to go and restore, that will be the button at the top here. Restore, system restore. You click there. You click on next. It's going to show you quite a few restore points. So on average, it'll be between 3 and 5. It might be more, it might be less. Most of them will say automatic here on the right, which means it was an automatic restore point. The description is also just going to say it's an automatic restore point. If you're lucky, you might have one, maybe two manual ones. Most folks have no manual ones because most people don't make manual restore points. It's only me that does that probably. You just choose a restore point where you're going to think that's going to be valid. So if you know more or less when this problem occurred, or if the user can give you a very accurate estimate as to when they started experiencing a certain problem, the idea here is to try and choose a date that was before that problem started. You click on next, and then the process will start. So I'm not going to click on next, otherwise it's going to mess up my virtual machine, and I need this virtual machine for the next topic. So let's go check out the next topic. Next up, we've got update and driver rollback. There's going to be many cases where you need to go and remove a faulty driver or a faulty update. Yes, you get many of those. And even if it's Microsoft that installed this driver as update, that does not mean you're not going to experience problems. There's many cases I've had in the past where Microsoft will go and install an update, which is supposedly tried and tested, and it will crash a whole freaking company in some cases. So let's tackle the first one, rolling back Windows updates. Where do we do that? There's two ways you can do it, but I see in this course they only show you the one way. So let's show you guys that on the virtual machine. Alright, here we are. So we're going to go to add and remove programs, which is going to be in your old control panel. So I'm going to go here to search. I'm going to run a search for our good old fashioned control panel. You can see it already pops up there. So I'm going to click on that. There we go. Now, where am I going to find add and remove programs? I think it's this one here at the bottom. It says programs. You're going to click on that. Programs and features. Now, you can go in there if you want to, and then on the left it will be there. Or you can just go here. You can see here it says view installed updates. And if you go there, you can actually remove updates from there as well. So I'm going to click there. Give it a moment. And on the average machine, you're going to see a fairly decently long list of updates that's taken place and when they took place. So if the user complains, my machine stopped working ever since yesterday afternoon, blah, 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 then you're going to go and look for an update that took place yesterday afternoon. If you don't see one, then it's probably something else that's causing this issue that the user is experiencing. But if you see, coincidentally, this morning or yesterday afternoon, there was an update that took place right after the person reported having this issue, there's a very good chance that that update is the culprit. So what you do is you just click on the update like so. I just selected that. You click on uninstall, and that's it. Another way you can do this is just to go to your, well, new settings app. So that's going to be by clicking on start. You go to settings. That's your settings app. You scroll down to Windows Update. There it is. And then somewhere around here, you'll be able to go and find it. I'm not going to tell you where because Microsoft likes changing this. Every second day, they're going to move it around, move it around. So go dig around. Here, you'll also be able to find it somewhere. I'm not going to say where because it's probably going to change by the time you've looked. All right, let's go back to our list. The next thing we want to talk about is removing pesky drivers, which are incorrect. So if you or the user has installed a driver and this is now causing a lot of issues, it's crashing the machine, failing to start the machine, whatever the case might be, there's multiple ways you can remove a driver. One way would be to go and use System Restore. I would not advise you to go and use that because System Restore does not just remove that driver. It removes a lot of other things you've changed recently. So anything you've done recently, like I explained System Restore earlier, also that will be affected. So System Restore should be used as your last resort. It's got a huge ripple effect. So I think some people call this the butterfly effect. It's not the quickest way, it's not the easiest way, and it's got a butterfly effect. So you want to use that as your last resort. So how do we actually restore a driver that has now been causing issues? That would be to go into the device manager, to go to the actual device itself, and to go and roll back that specific driver. Let me show you guys how we do that. All right, here we are. So let's go to the device manager. How you get there is up to you guys. I'm just going to go ahead and right click here on start because that's probably one of the quickest ways to do that. Going to go straight to device manager. There we go. Then I'm going to pretend it's the graphics driver causing an issue. You can do this for whatever device. So if I have identified that the graphics driver is the culprit, that is the one that I or the user have installed recently, it's giving me issues. You're going to go here. You're going to go and expand the device. In my case, it's the graphics card. Right click on the device. You're going to go to properties here. You want to go to driver tab. And then normally this button here, it says roll back driver would be enabled. So if you've installed at least one extra driver afterwards, besides the driver that comes with Windows, that button would be enabled. And you can go and click on that, and it's going to restore it back to the previous driver, which is most likely a working driver. That is the quickest way, the easiest way to go and do it. And let me phrase it this way, the least amount of administrative effort way. Now, why did I just say that, guys? It's because that's how they're going to phrase it in the exam. Sometimes in the exam, you're going to get one or more questions where they will ask you, user 1 needs to go and do blah, blah, blah. Which of the following methods will be the best way to go and do it using the least amount of administrative effort? Whenever they say least amount of administrative effort in the exam, that means there's more than one answer here that's actually correct. They want to see if you know which one will be the best way to go and do it, the quickest way to go and do it with the least consequences. And when it comes to removing a driver, what I just showed you guys is the least amount of administrative effort. It's very quick, very easy, very straightforward to go and do that with no consequences. It's only going to affect that one driver and that one device. Another answer you would see in the exam for this question will be system restore, which is not incorrect, but it's definitely not the least amount of administrative effort because it's going to take longer. System restore could take up to 2 hours, mind you, and it's going to possibly affect other things on the machine as well. It's going to have consequences to it. So this is the quickest and the easiest way to get the job done. All right, let's move on to our next topic. Troubleshoot performance issues. So if you or the users are experiencing some sort of issues on the machine, this is most likely going to be a client machine and not a server, but the stuff I'm about to show you does work on servers as well. What can we go and do about that? So first of all, let's look at sluggish performance diagnosis. So if the machine is a little bit non-responsive, it's a bit laggy, it's a bit slow, how can we go and identify this? So one of the most common ways to do this would probably be to go to Task Manager, Resource Monitor, Performance Monitor. Let's face it, it's probably going to be Task Manager first. And if that doesn't give you joy, even users can go to Task Manager. Most users know that. Then you as a technician would normally go to Resource Monitor or Performance Monitor. If that doesn't work, you can go and reboot. I kid you not. You've probably heard that joke a lot in IT where they say, have you tried turning it off and on again? That's funny because it's actually true. It surprisingly fixes a lot of things in IT, guys. It really does. Now, here's a couple of common troubleshooting steps you guys can go and try. This is actually part of the course. In real life, it's a heck of a lot more. You can go and try and apply updates. You know, sometimes an update would solve the issue. Maybe it's a program, maybe it's the machine, maybe it's the operating system. Update whatever it is you're working with. That could possibly solve your issue. You can go and try and defragment the hard drive. I don't actually recommend that because since Windows 10 came out, this is actually done automatically. So on Windows 10, Windows 11, this is kind of redundant. Unless the user is using something older than Windows 10, then yeah, you can go and try that. You can go and verify requirements and add resources. So maybe the person is trying to run a program or a game. It's probably going to be a game. And they don't have enough resources. They don't have enough RAM. Or they don't have a fast enough or a big enough graphics card to run this. So verify that they actually meet the minimum requirements for whatever it is they're trying to do here. You can go look at startup items. This used to be under MS config. Now you'll find it under the startup tab in the task manager. Check if there's not nonsense starting up with Windows that does not need to start up. Maybe there's services running in the background that should not be running. Check that out too. If there is, turn them off. And then lastly, folks, test for power management issues. Now, this sounds complicated. It might sound silly, but I kid you not, this has actually even happened to me, especially on laptops, because we've got something called power saver mode on a laptop. So if you're running on a battery on a laptop, the machine sometimes goes into this power saver mode where it tries to conserve battery life, battery power. And if it tries to do that, it's going to send less power to the CPU and the RAM. Less power means less performance. And sometimes when you put the machine back on power, it doesn't go out of that mode. So just go and check if the machine is in the right power mode. I would suggest running it in high performance mode if you're plugged into power, because then you're not going to have any lag. Alright, folks, that concludes Module 13 of the A Plus course. Once again, thank you very much for watching this course, watching this video. Thank you very much for your support. If you haven't done it already, remember, give the video a like, remember to subscribe. And before you guys disappear, special thank you to all of you that's been sponsoring me and the channel. I really appreciate each and every one of you guys. The guys that are Patreons, thank you very much. Those of you that has been giving me donations on PayPal. Those of you that's been buying me coffees and milkshakes, love you guys. And even those of you that's been clicking on the thanks button below the video, really appreciate it, guys. Thank you very, very much. There is a list on the screen for you guys of the PayPal and Patreon sponsors. And if any of you guys would like to sponsor me as well so I can make more of these kinds of videos, you can find all of that information in the video description down below. And there you will also find nice little timestamps, for all the topics in this video if you're looking for something specific or if you want to go and revise. You will also find the Discord server in there. And in case I haven't mentioned it before, I'll be mentioning it more and more towards the end of this course. I'm also going to be making practice question videos at the end of this course. So once I've done the last module, which is module 20, I'm going to be making one or more videos which are going to have practice questions in them. It's not the actual questions from the exam because that's not allowed. But these practice questions will test you on the same concepts, the same goals. They will measure you on the same skills and all that kinds of nonsense. So that's to prepare you guys for the exam. And in those questions, I will be explaining each and every one of those questions with the possible answers. So that's an extra I will be adding for you guys. Alrighty, folks. Let's talk again in Module 14. Enjoy.